human connection. Can we have him on stage, please? And a round of applause. With him, we have Jonquil Cooper.
Thank you, Sanjana. You've been great as always. Hi, good evening. And Kolkata, as always, an exemplary crowd. And I hope, those seats start filling up soon because the luminaries have stopped speaking. And we have another set here. Yes, isn't that what's been happening? So thank you, Aritra, Jonquil, and Namita, kind of all stellar books. Do you have copies of your books? I think that would be useful. I have Jonquil's and Namita's in my bag. We can just have them here. Sure. I think it's useful. Tanvi, can I just... Aritra's has not been released as yet, but Aritra, that cover is quite something. If there is a cover prize, you should certainly get the publisher to send it in. I was quite taken in. Can we just have the books? Thank you. Thank you, Satyajit. Okay, so there we are. Now, I'd start, of course, this was not the city was meant to be, but Aritra, we'd start with you. We'd start with all of you. What triggered this book? Because I think you have to set the context for the fact that, these are books that people should read, and all these are very, very fine books. And, it's magnanimous that authors allow us to kind of get a peek into their psyche. And it often, one's conversation with oneself often opens the floodgates to helping others. And I think these 3 exemplary books have done exactly that. So Aritra, I'll bounce this off you first.
Thank you, Priyambada. Thank you, everyone, for supporting us, for coming here, for making this event so special. I'd like to take this question on because I think there was something in my life over a period of time which I think happens to everyone, and that gives us inspiration to write or to perform or to produce art. And in my case, it was no different. What I did actually capitalize on was a general observation among people around me, and also in myself as well. And the observation was basically very simple. I found people who were partnered, in a sense, meaning that they were with other people. Could be, they were with friends, they were with, they had colleagues, they had, relatives. They seemed on the surface to have a very full life in terms of connections. But internally, there was a deep aching within. And how did I know that? Well, I can tell you that I personally felt this. I felt this first, and that's how I knew that this perhaps was an issue. And when I did speak to a few people who were very close to me who actually had the courage to open up, I found that it was actually something that they shared. And it is this deep aching which I felt was this sense of loneliness, lonesomeness, as I call it. It had nothing to do with the presence of company. And what I also found was, that most people don't admit to this. They don't even acknowledge it to themselves. And a lot of the times, they're looking for relief outside, external help. Could be in the form of advice, could be in the form of, short-term gratification, short-term connections, etc. But then the aching never goes away. It just keeps getting worse and worse over time. And this was a problem, because over a period of time, you become a different person. You start feeling hollowed out, and you also present different faces in society. And what I felt was this book was born out of this understanding and a personal reckoning that actually, in order to really address loneliness, it is important to kind of look within rather than to look for solutions outside. The journey from isolation always begins within. And the stories that I presented in the book are essentially mirrors, mirrors that anyone can kind of hold up to themselves to see a glimpse of themselves. And they might give you a glimpse of how to actually come out of it and to find a higher purpose and sense of meaning. So I hope that I answered that question.
It does. So that's what fueled you to kind of write the book. Jonquil, before I come to you, I have to ask you this. You have to forgive me. You don't have to answer if you don't want to. But was Hugh Grant a good kisser?
Good evening, everybody. Happy Day of India's Republic. Yes. I've got that all back to front. But namaste, and thank you so much for being here. And also our inviting me here. So there's a little bit of a story in my book right at the beginning. I wanted to sort of set the stage of what my life was before I came to India and what it could have gone down as a sort of parallel route, but definitely didn't. And really, it was a kind of a moment with Hugh Grant. I mean, he wasn't the pivotal kind of transitional point, but it was definitely a moment where I realized I don't want to have this life, and I don't want to have, this sort of chasing something that doesn't really give you much satisfaction, or you're just constantly looking outside of yourself. And actors do that, they live by that, and that's okay because that's part of what they have to do. But for me, my life path was definitely going in a different direction.
So how did you stumble into yoga?
Right, well, so actually I started out as an actor, and I was basically doing a performance, and it was after this performance that I went up to my director and I said, you know, in performance, there's a truth. You're always seeking a truth as an actor, and you're wanting to convey that truth to the audience. Now, there's a magic that unfolds because you're playing this part with other people, and they're also connected to that suspended belief. And it's a wonderful feeling to sort of create that. But afterwards, I was like, but, you know, I was calling the director, so, but, you know, if this is all true and we can believe in this for a moment, then I could also be making up my life as well. You know, and everybody in my life are also playing roles that can also be sort of made up, and it might not be real. So then the big question was, well, what is reality? And I walked out, I said, I'm not going to do acting anymore. I have to find this answer. Because the director just touched my nose. And I was like, well, that's not an answer. And I was very young also, so I didn't really understand the depth of my question. But it was in London, and I was walking around just residential street, and I just saw this building. It was all painted orange, and I was like, what's that? And I walked in, there's this lovely smell, the aura of incense, and I was like, I like this place. And then somebody came up to me and they said, are you here for the yoga? I said, what yoga? I'd never really heard of it before. So he said, well, there's a class that starts in 5 minutes, and if you haven't been and done it before, it's free. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to try. And then in the class, I realized this is going to be my answer. It's going to help me find what that reality is. I know it. I can feel it in my bones.
In the first instance itself.
Yeah.
First class.
Yeah, first class.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
And that's how the book started. And then you wanted to share this with the rest of the world.
Yeah, well, now,
Yes.
the time of doing, it was much more.
It was 92, right?
Yes, at the part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I feel the story has relevance, and it can relate on so many levels, and I think it's within us all to ask those questions. You know, who am I? Why am I here? What is authenticity? What does it mean to be authentic? How does one become authentic? I mean, it's not really a becoming because one is, but you know, you've got to kind of distract, you know, all of those layers really.
And Namita, this is a very interesting book. And almost, you know, when I read it, I felt, you know, you didn't have to give up your cosmopolitan either, not just your coffee, to be able to kind of jump into
There's no way I'm going to give up a lot of things.
Yes, but you didn't have to.
I think this whole binary between the material and the spiritual is utterly absurd. And I think that, you know...
a modern construct which needn't have been there?
Well, yeah, because I think that if one were to shift binary thinking into layered thinking, it just makes so much more sense. And that is why I used that, that headline, which was that you don't have to give up coffee to read the Upanishads. It's a metaphor, really, because, you know, this, like, let's take the idea of looking at the symmetry on a leaf. Like, it can be looked at from a scientific lens, you know, a botanical lens, and a sense of wonder about the very extraordinary nature of creativity which comes from somewhere. So I don't see why, and I suspect that even a lot of scientists at some point do sort of know that there are answers that they will never reach. In fact, I was at the Kerala Lit Fest just last week, and I was so validated to hear Sunita Williams speak, the astronaut, speak about how when she was circulating in outer space, she just couldn't help but think that there was something extraordinary. There was a power that had created all of this stuff, which was so beyond man. And I love that idea. It's so liberating to sort of relinquish control, which is what we're all essentially raised to believe we have. And I think it was just an organic sort of a progression for me, triggered by a particular moment in my personal life. But that was just merely a trigger. You know, I think that what I was seeking had been something that had always, I'd sort of dipped into through my Indian classical music training, through the Masterji who taught
Your
me.
Maushi.
And my Maushi, and all these different people who'd been in my life. And, you know, there's a philosopher called Schopenhauer who actually had read the Upanishads, I think, in the 18th century, who actually said that at some point you are able to map your life in a certain way, looking back, and it all makes sense. And that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to sort of connect a lot of the dots in, you know, my aesthetic life, my intellectual life, my spiritual life, and come up with something that was coherent and actually made sense to me.
But you know what I think connects all these three books is the fact that until you find yourself, you're never able to really open the floodgates to kind of helping others. Because even though these are very intense personal journeys, I think these are stories which and you know, these are tales which can actually help people find themselves. And almost like a Walden Pond moment for all of you, that, you know, a sense of, you know, retreat from the world that we know, you know, into the world that, you know, you're trying to find for yourself. Tell me something, you know, Aritra, I find this in your book. Akla Cholore was mentioned. And Rabindranath appears in your book in the sense that you talk about the fact that, you know, our religion, at least in India, is very rooted to nature itself. But, you know, Akla Cholore, and especially, and Jonquil, you know, we're in the land of Tagore. He talks about the fact that, you know, you have to walk a certain path on your own, solitude, loneliness, just to find kind of yourself. A lot of your books have these, you know, these tropes, you know, these themes about finding yourself within, you know, the larger cosmos. Tell me, how did you, I mean, this was something which you wanted to kind of talk about right now, but why would you, but why now? Why was this book relevant now? For you, Aritra, yes.
I think what has happened today is with the advent of social media.
You feel that in a connected world, you're that much more disconnected.
Exactly, exactly. What I find is that the level of disconnection is actually only increasing, not decreasing.
So the more connected we are, the more disconnected we are in the larger sense.
Because the meaning of connection itself has been lost. The meaning of connection is not familiarity.
Or do we take it for granted? We feel that if there are n number of followers, you feel that, you know, there are n numbers of supporters, which doesn't translate into the real world. There's just numbers.
We've forgotten what its true meaning is. I think that's the main point. That's what I feel. You know, we knew it at one point of time, perhaps. But
maybe we valued it differently. I think the lens through which we look at now.
I would disagree with you. I think we knew it in our hearts, but we forgot it. It's a forgotten thing. It's almost like,
so how would you bring it back? How would you kind of reintegrate it into our lives if you think we've lost that?
So it actually comes in, you know, again, it starts with yourself, right? So it means basically that you need...
You open a bridge to yourself to reach out to others.
The first thing is witnessing, you know. You have to witness who you are. So you have to be honest. You know, you have to be... First, you have to see what it is. You know, if you don't see what it is, and then, you know, and you start like making value judgments from beforehand, it's not going to... It's going to sort of defeat the purpose.
But did you find yourself, did you see yourself, you know, sometimes you literally are looking at yourself unraveling even as you write. And for a lot of writers, I mean, you find meaning even in yourself. I mean, it's a journey not just seeking answers, but it reveals things about you which you didn't know existed. I mean, for you, Namita, it was... You know, it was a question which had bothered you. And, you know, when I read your book, I realized you were probably prepping yourself to come to the stage of realization, whether it was, you know, through your music, you know, through your masters, you'd come and give you lessons. And almost like, you know, life is prepping you for this kind of dip into...
So life was prepping me, but I certainly had a very different idea about what life was all
But
about.
that surprised you in the end.
Yeah, it did. Because, I've grown up in Bombay in a very Christian, Western-oriented school. I went to college in America. I did have a very linear approach to things. The fact that I had all these inputs in my childhood were just kind of quaint excursions that we've all been exposed to, etc. But my essential way of thinking was, I have control, I need my external validation from X, Y, and Z, I need to tick those boxes and carry on. And, and at some point, I realized that that is only a very small part of the picture. And the interesting thing for me was that a lot of this is in the very texts that we've sort of in many ways discarded, because there are a lot of issues.
And Namita, I think what is very interesting is the fact that you make such a clear distinction between saffron and tangerine, because saffron today is a tricky word to use, and it's a word which is rather misused because it has huge political connotations. And I love the fact that she brought up tangerine, which I think has happy connotations of travels, of lands, of
tangerine is distinct
and it's safe. Okay, let's just for context, it is safe.
There's absolutely no connection.
But it was very important that you made that disconnect because I'm sure you would have been judged simply for the fact that you were turning inwards. Your journey inwards might have been misunderstood by a lot of people who would have said that you're doing something which not a lot of people do. And that is true, because this jump in. I was very surprised because I approached this book as a skeptic. And I don't know how much of my skepticism remains, but I'm very buoyed by the fact that you've had, that you've not had to give up too much of yourself to kind of seek this truth out, and that you still are in the same place, probably transformed, but you're still in the same place. And the fact that faith can also, be a dialogue where you don't have to kind of, it's almost like an onion peeling, you're almost finding your true self. But the fact that today if I say that I'm a practicing Hindu, I think twice before I say it publicly.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate, actually.
No, it's because the difference between religion and faith has almost been kind of blurred. Those lines have been blurred very, radically, and that frightens me. That, if somebody asked me the other day, are you a practicing Hindu? And I didn't, for a moment I said I'm more spiritual than religious, because that was the safest thing to say. But your book, Tangerine, I mean, it could have easily been saffron, there were notes of it there. But I think I like the fact that, you've kept it kind of real through it all.
Without getting into too much politics, because I don't want to go to jail, I want to go back to Bombay.
No, you're not going to go to jail in this city. You'd actually be fine here. Not in this city.
Actually, we're in Alipur jail right now, right?
No, but this is jail. You can go in, but you can come out. They don't keep you incarcerated in for too long.
The point is that anyone who uses Hinduism to either self-aggrandize or to other somebody else or another community, there's nothing in Hinduism that suggests that. So it's actually really foolish for us to, as thinking people, to even make the two synonymous. It's very clearly being used. And so I think that it's important to even reappropriate something that is part of our lives,
But you also don't have to be Hindu to be able to follow any of this,
absolutely.
Isn't this?
That's the point.
And that's something, I'll come back to you, Jonquil. I mean, you obviously, when you talk about approaching yoga from the level of a normal person, and not, yoga as espoused by a, yogi or a maharishi or anything. I mean, I'm very keen to know I'm not going to ask you whether you're a practicing Christian, but when you came down to India in '92, how did your family react? Because, a lot of, like for Namita, people were surprised that, she wanted to delve back into her past to find answers, which, were fairly, would have come as a surprise to a lot of people who might have known her, because she was, cosmopolitan, anglicized from a background. How did your family kind of react to your snap decision to go to India in 1992? And you had quite a circuitous route into India, from Sri Lanka, then getting into it. That was quite something. In '92, that was a different world we inhabited.
So that's correct, yeah. And I do come from a very conventional English family, and it doesn't really bend into the arts even. So even when I wanted to be an actor, that was kind of looked upon as like, no, you're not going to do that. It's kind of deemed to be sort of lesser of what I was supposed to do as an expectation within the family. But really, my dad in the 1950s drove all the way to India in a car on his own. So I definitely feel that there's something living through me from him, and that kind of quest to find oneself, however the path and whatever that path might lead you to. And in some ways, it wasn't too much of a surprise for my family members, because my father, having done this in the 1950s, late 1950s, that is. And so also going back into the idea of being spiritual or going on that spiritual path. I was always very spiritual as a child. My mom would say to me, I think, you know, you'd be good as a nun. And it was absolutely terrifying for me, the thought that I'd be going off in a convent and living there for the rest of my life. So thankfully, that didn't happen. And India gave me the chance to...
But in your mind, you didn't have any kind of, there was no dichotomy, there was no kind of clash between what you were raised. You were raised Christian, and then you come in here. I mean, I'm sure there were tenets that you questioned.
Yeah, I mean...
Was there no moral kind of tussle in your head?
Not at all. I mean, honestly speaking, I grew up, yes, Christian. I totally love Jesus. I still do. And I consider like that love is very similar to the love of Lord Krishna. But you see, I had a lot of conflict with the beliefs of the Catholic Church, and I felt it very rigid. I felt it very judgmental. And also, I always believed in reincarnation. So it wasn't like a belief, it was like a knowledge, like this is for real. And when I would talk to the priests about it, they would say, no, 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 there's only one life. And I was like, but it doesn't make sense. You know, there is something else, and I know it, I can feel it. But yeah, so it drew me away from that. It kind of, you know, made me decide, I know this isn't right for me.
Well, that's very, very interesting. Aritra, I know you, all of you, Namita, do you journal? I didn't get a chance to ask you this. Journal, do you journal?
Not really, because I write for a living, and so it's a bit much if I were to go home and do the same.
Yeah, exactly. No, I don't journal as well. But both Aritra and Jonquil, you journal on a regular basis. Aritra, how do you see that kind of, do you think that helps you kind of come to terms with what's in your head? You know, the act of putting it out there, and then you have your thoughts, and then you connect it to larger stories?
Absolutely. I think, you know, for me, it's almost like a laboratory in some sense. So
you in your pages?
Yes. I mean, basically, you need a space where you can kind of, you know, sort of express yourself without any fear of judgment, in a sense. And I think journaling really gives you the space to do that, where you are not trying to prove anything to anyone. You're just doing something as simple as maybe, you know, writing about a day. But the interesting thing is, I find, is when you don't hold yourself back, when you just allow the thoughts and the feelings to flow, then it can actually go in different directions that you haven't anticipated. So for me, sometimes it's, you know, it starts off as catharsis, and then it ends up being an ideation as well, you know. So, you know, but not that I'm specifically searching for ideation. You know, I'm trying to...
But it doesn't worry you, or one day somebody's going to find those things and then land you. That's used to be my biggest fear, that I'm putting my greatest things in there. Galti se lands in somebody's hand, that is, I'm dead. It lands up in the IT cells of some, you know, party. You are hung out, you know, they literally hang you out to dry for the rest of your life. So that was something, that's why I've never journaled. I was like, you know, if it falls in the wrong hands, you're dead.
Well, I'm hoping Mr. Tim Cook will have a little more authority with our government, so...
We've been hoping for a long time then. Namita, I'm going to come back to something which I think has really struck me about your book, about how you use traditional Vedic stages of life to kind of look at, you know, our modern existence, and you know, whilst being deeply, you know, inquisitive about it all. Why don't you tell the audience about this? Because I think, you know, when we grew up in history, we used to learn, you know, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, all of that, and you've examined that through the lens of everyday life. I think that was a huge kind of revelation for me. It was really interesting.
Well, it was also a device for me to like divide the book. But really, you know, I love the way there are these suggested ashrams, which is that you start as a brahmacharya.
Stages, as in ashrams would be stages of life. The 4 stages.
And a brahmacharya is a student and a celibate. And then you move on to grahast, which is the stage of acquisition, right? So you acquire a family, you acquire wealth, you acquire relationships, you acquire your householder life. Then you move into Vanaprasth, which is the contemplative life. It's not literally going into the forest, but it's a forest state of mind, which enables you to sort of slow down and slowly start letting go. And then there's sannyas, which is again not literally, it doesn't have to be literal, where you go off into the Himalayas. It's a state of absolute retreat and relinquishing of all the things that you're not going to take with you. And so what I liked about this is that it sort of helps you to engage with every aspect of life and not really give anything up, because you do need to be in that stage of learning. You do need to be in a stage where you kind of fulfill all the roles that are expected of you. I would never recommend to my 24-year-old child that he considers the Vanaprasth at this stage. I'd be a little disturbed, because I think that it's when you go through all these stages in life, and by the way, these are just broad parameters. You can easily be a student again at 60, and you can be, you know, getting married at 75 or whatever.
No, but those lines have been blurred today. I mean, they were more kind of, you know, they were categories, you know, 25 years. So the imagination was that you'd live 100, so you'd have like 25, 4 blocks of 25
and I think it was more about engaging with every part of life.
Or
and
that, you know, your body was primed for certain activities around certain stages in life. So the first 25, you were celibate, you were learning, and then you build a family.
Yeah.
Then you slow down biologically as well. So I think it ticked with the biological clock as well, you know, that kind of
there's
portion.
a logic to it, which I just love. I love the fact that I consider myself in Vanaprasth, but I'm sitting in my apartment. But I'm sitting in my apartment, but I've kind of in my head, I know I have started, you know, looking at things differently. And I love it. So that's why I sort of use those 4 stages, because the book is a journey. It's my romp into Hinduism, right? And so
But very accessible Hinduism.
Well,
that's
absolutely.
what I'm going to, that's exactly how I'm going to kind of caveat that.
I mean, I think that's also because, you know, we tend to, a lot of the writing about Hinduism has become really inaccessible. It's very arcane. I honestly found that
I don't think we've even explained Hinduism in layman terms yet.
I mean, there are tons and thousands
but
of books.
But not in a way that I think a lot of people would access it. And today, again, you know, this jump into the world that you're taking is colored by religion. So a lot of people don't do it, you know, that jump. So people are nervous, they, you know, they think it's prescriptive. Now, you know, I'll come back to you, Jonquil, because I think, you know, yoga for you is more than a way of life, isn't it? I mean, it's you found yourself through yoga.
Yeah.
And for everybody who wants to know, she's a yoga teacher as well, right?
Yes,
and where is your studio? In Goa?
I have many students in Mumbai. I've been teaching for over 30 years. So
but where are you? You're primarily based in Goa right now, aren't you?
I am based in Goa, yeah. There's a lot of online classes that I do as well. But I like to create workshops. I do all kinds of things. But going back to your question, though, about yoga and way of life, and also how I do see it's very connected to Hinduism. And you can't really separate the two at all, in fact. But the point is that it's not a religion. You see, I've taught loads of people also from different religious backgrounds. And some of them come up to me and they say, oh, but this isn't my religion, and I don't think my family are going to appreciate me doing this. And I say...
Within India, or you have students abroad as well?
Well, abroad, but, you know, they're family, you know, it doesn't matter where you really are situated in the planet. You know, you bring your traditions, your heritage, wherever you go. And
your biases as well.
Yeah, but you're not biases, but your ignorance, your conditioning.
But that is, well, in a way, it is a bias, yes.
So, yeah, but I tend to sort of try to set an example, because it's through that example which really I think is a universal message of yoga, and really essentially what the Upanishads and what Hinduism really was really a universal knowledge. And yes, it has become something slightly more kind of formulaic, but actually, you know, it's a British thing, unfortunately, where there's divide and rule, there's divide and create conflict. And when India was colonized, it was the British who gave it this name, Hinduism. And then it was able to sort of separate people and go, you're in this block and you're in that block, and we will stop the festivities and celebrations that you might have together because we want to rule you. And I grew up with this mentality, so I'm very familiar with it.
In Britain, you're not taught colonial history at all, and you probably gleaned this when you came here, right? Because, I have children within the British system in Singapore. They don't know anything about, they only know, they go Gandhi, and I get very upset because they're not taught, it's not part of your English national curriculum.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely shocking. It's shocking. It's shocking. But that's part of also the propaganda. I mean, they have to continue that lie, really, just to suit the mythology of it. To justify what has happened in the past. Unfortunately, people, because they don't know, they can't reflect and look on it. But, however, through books, through stories, this is how we can break that mythology. And one of my reasons, and not wanting to make it very political or religious, my book, and make it about you, which is what it's called. It's not yoga, it's you, which is what yoga and Hinduism is always trying to teach you. It's in you. Everything is in you. And it's that self, and it's not anything else. To break these boundaries and these barriers where we have these judgments. I don't know if you're familiar with the book Covenant of Water by Abraham Verghese. So there's a lot of knowledge and stories in here that, I know family members that have read this book who didn't know bits of this history in India, because it spans 3 generations from the beginning of the 19th century. And when my mother read this book, she's like, oh gosh, I had no idea Churchill was such a, not a very nice person, basically.
We're sitting in Bengal where we've paid a price for Churchill.
I said, Mom, in India, I know this. Like, Churchill is not a good person. He never was a good person. And but in this book, it changed her mind. Now, she's in her 80s, and she can change her mind in her 80s. It's a good thing. People can change through the written word and take in something that will shatter their whole concepts. And it's just the way how you write it. If you make it into something that's emotional, that's engaging, that's about people, and it's your story, and it's heartfelt, then you basically rewrite history, in the right way, their story, your story, not his story.
Aritra, coming to you, I was very intrigued that, you come from one of Bengal's most kind of, peerless, families when it comes to publishing. I mean, I grew up with the Telegraph and I was going to school. But, in all your endeavors, you've always been looking for the larger truth. I mean, I think this is a tenet which kind of binds all your 3 books together, that you're out there looking for the one truth, and your means are different, but you're kind of, your journeys are all different, but the destination is almost always the same. You had a startup where you were looking at helping people. Take us through that. That, I think, is quite interesting because you come from a totally, I mean, it's a business background, and, you've tried to kind of bring ABP into a very different kind of world. And I think, as a businessman, I mean, it's got a huge, I mean, I was quite intrigued by that, your jump from, trying to create profit to kind of creating, spiritual profit, more like it.
Well, actually, I've been obviously born and brought up in a business family, but the business was strictly not the business of business, but was the business of thought, I felt,
But that's what we're all in Kolkata. We're all in the business of thought in more ways than one.
And I think
you're much more than all of us. You're much more than all of us.
But I think, the main difference was that I think I was probably personally oriented towards the thought and less to the business. But I think I ended up sort of moving more towards the business in the initial part of my, life. I think probably maybe against my general nature, or strengths, so as to speak. But of course, I gained a lot. I learned a lot during that whole experience. But it was really when I actually got into entrepreneurship with essentially a desire to make an impact in the world for myself. I wanted to really create my own legacy in a manner of speaking, at that point of time. And that was essentially the driver to getting into entrepreneurship initially. But then, as I sort of got into it further, then I realized that it was that I really wanted to help people with similar issues that I faced in my life as well. But I think, the whole journey of entrepreneurship taught me a lot of things, about people, about how to run a venture, but it also actually taught me about how to manage failure more than anything else, because I did feel like I had failed, and failure, of course, is how you perceive it. In the beginning, I did feel like I had failed in a very bad way. But over a period of time, when I actually started to write, then I realized it wasn't really, it might have looked like a failure from a, from a conventional point of view.
I was going to say that.
Because, there are hard metrics, as they say in business, to evaluate everything, But in terms of what you learn and what you absorb internally, that's a whole different story. And in that perspective, I think it was a tremendously enriching and fulfilling experience for me, because it cemented my life now as a writer, which I would not have done had I not actually been in the world of in the sphere of entrepreneurship.
So do you see yourself more as a writer or an entrepreneur, or a bit of both?
I think there's always probably an entrepreneur inside me, but I redefined entrepreneurship not necessarily in starting up something for the sake of profit, but perhaps bringing my ideas to reality, in a manner of speaking. If I look at it from that point of view, then I think everyone is an entrepreneur, because everyone has ideas, and everyone, as long as everyone is empowered to take them to reality, then they are actually entrepreneurs. I redefined for myself what an entrepreneur was, and I think in that sense, I reinvented myself.
But writing was essentially very cathartic for you when you're putting it all out there.
Yes.
And do you find yourself gravitating more towards your writing or towards your business boards?
So I don't think it's an either or. Writing is the core of who I am. I mean, as in, writing is the means through which I express my soul and through which I can reach a higher truth. Like for someone else, it might be through mathematics, or someone else might be through yoga or through dance. I can feel that same level of, how should I say, inner joy through writing, that sense of passion, which I feel, and doing something for its own sake, not for results, not for reward. That was the only time I was able to feel that was actually when I was writing.
Actually, I'm going to now take a segue into something which I think is, okay, we're going to get a sound check there, but can I just quickly take a segue and then we'll take a question each. Satyajit is saying because they're going to have a sound check over there for Aman and Ayan's performance, which means that we're going to be having TikToks all over our heads and we're not going to be able to hear each other. Why? And this, I think, has been a running theme, which is not exactly a running theme, but an undercurrent on all your books. Why are marriages failing all over the place? And why? No, this is really something that I would love to ask you guys. Most of my class has been divorced. I would just love to know from all three of you, those of you willing to tell me, why are marriages so difficult to sustain anymore? In fact, somebody came and asked me the other day, do you think we should have, marriages should be 30-year renewal contracts? And somebody said, no, 30 years is too long, make it into blocks of 5.
Well,
go on.
Let me try this one. So I think that one of the biggest problems, and this really doesn't apply only to marriage, but that is the most intimate space that tends to implode, is this need to change another person or to try and...
as opposed to acceptance.
Acceptance, and frankly, the only person you can change is yourself, up to a point, your children. And I think that...
With some luck.
Well, exactly. And so I think that... one of the things I learned was that a great kind of impetus to change the world, other people, etc., can only happen up to a point. And we've sort of like moved away from the need for a certain interiority that allows you to just kind of be okay with even things not being the way you'd like them to be. I find that a very kind of incredible thing, and I think that honestly, the other big thing, of course, is that I think that in India, most people treat marriage in the most pragmatic way, taking romance out of it. And it's rather sensible because, you know, you can find romance in books and in movies, but it's impossible to sustain.
In a marriage?
In a marriage over like a lifetime. I mean, you're very lucky.
No, I'm not saying anything.
Nothing personal,
I'm
but,
not
you know,
saying
honestly,
anything.
and so I think, you know, there's a tendency over here in India to really believe that it's just like you do it for, you know, sort of, well, property and your children and like to create a sense of like stability and then actually move together spiritually. That's what's been prescribed. And
Aritra, very quickly, what's your take? Because we'll have only 2 minutes to take questions before they start that.
So, I mean, I don't think it's fair to really compare how marriages are today with how marriages were.
No, but in general, the fact that, you know, they are, you know, there is stress. I mean, a lot of people are finding it hard to stay married.
So if you look at relationships in general, right, marriage, of course, is what I call it as socially contracted relationships, if you think about it. But if you look at relationships in a broader, interpersonal relationships for companionship in a broader sense, then you'll see that actually most of them are hostage to expectations, really, you know, from either side. And essentially expectations...
He lands up on all my stages. This guy has followed me through. Yeah, he loves it. He's been at all my lit fests. APJ, he was there. That day he was there, and today he's here. He's quite sweet, actually.
I feel that expectations are the enemy of warmth and bonding at the end of the day. And expectations have risen, I think, within relationships at a phenomenal rate over the last, you know.
But that will go both ways as well,
both
right?
ways. And probably now it's easier than ever before to also do the legal work or the actual work of getting divorced, like, you know, both from a sociological point of view, also from a legal, financial point of view, it's much easier actually to actually enact that. So the combination of the expectations going up and the other...
The fact that you can leave easily.
Easier.
Well,
I think that combination...
That depends on how good your lawyers are.
But that being... well, look, overall, I would say that, you know, I think the society and even the legal system is moving towards, I think, more consensual...
well, that's where they kind of expect you to kind of amicably resolve it as long as opposed to stretching it out.
Yeah.
I have a slightly different view. I'm not too sure if you've got time
Very
for
quickly,
this.
because I want to take questions.
Honestly speaking, I think there's a lot of emotional confusion. That also relates to the expectations. It also relates to the change in families and all of this thing. But yeah, I think it comes down to that. And also the influence of Hollywood and Western idealism, which hasn't worked for the West, right? It hasn't. And yet over here it seems to be quite a draw for attraction. Yeah, I feel that really there's a loss of those inner values that you, Namita, were talking about, in the sense of understanding the difference between what is a value and what is an expectation. And really that's the key to hold a marriage, is the value of it.
So any questions for Namita, Aritra, and Jonquil? Do you have a mic? Any questions? Because Satyajit is getting testy over there that we need to stop because they're starting things there. Any?
Yeah, I have a question here.
Yes, hi.
Yeah.
We can't see you because the light is absolutely so strong. No, if you come. No, we can hear you. Go ahead, hi.
Yeah. So thank you for such a wonderful discussion. Now, I have a question for Jonquil. Over the ages, we have seen in India that there had been people coming from the Western world in pursuit of spiritualism. Now, while I agree that yoga has a spiritual side of it, but it can also be taken as something which gives you physical fitness or maybe stress relief. So, in today's context, the people who are, visiting this country in pursuit of spiritualism, does the country really fulfill their expectation in today's context?
Yes, great question. Thank you very much for asking. My feeling about this is that for most people from the West, they're already so confused in their head that they don't really understand the deeper wisdom that India offers, and they will draw upon their own interpretation of it. And I think that has what's happened in the West. They have drawn that, and that's why it's kind of become a little bit more commercialized. However, yoga will always be yoga, right? You know, as the Upanishads will always be like the root before you get the trunk of the tree. It's what holds it together. So no matter what and how it bends, I truly believe that it has a seed. That seed, no matter how it might grow, has truth. And so it will trickle down somehow or other, even if it might be a little bit wavy right now and not so rooted in a consciousness that relates to the truth of what it is, which is what it is, if that answers your question.
Do we have any others? Any for Namita and Aritra? I mean, both brilliant books. Namita's is very accessible. Aritra talks about loneliness from a spectrum which I've rarely seen. Any? Otherwise, we'll call the session to a head before they start going ting-tong over there. Any more for Jonquil? Come on, Kolkata. Hello. Wake up.
Going.
No? You know, the doggy only wants to hang around here because he's very fond of me. So he's hanging on there. He's very sweet. He's been a regular over here at my sessions. So, well, all it leaves me to say is that these are three. Okay, this is an incredible book, and you guys should buy it, and she'll be there to sign over the across. This, again, is a fabulously accessible book about yoga and one's personal journey to finding oneself through it. And Aritra's is exemplary too, and I'm sorry we don't have a copy of your book. Is it available in bookstores yet, Aritra?
No, it's going to be available in early February, but my other books are here.
But they're fabulous. He's a fabulous author, and you should, I mean, we've been really, really interested in the fact that he looks at loneliness from a spectrum which kind of gets everybody together. So it's not it's a look at something which is, you know, it's a fictional, it's a fictional book, but it's absolutely very, very accessible. So thank you all for being here and for joining our wonderful authors here. Please buy their books, because at the end of the day, books should find their ways, you know, back into your homes, into your bookshelves, and into your lives. And these are incredible stories. So thank you, Kolkata, for being exemplary. Thank you, Aritra, Jonquil, and ever-charming Namita for being part of this panel, and for Malavika for actually having this wonderful session. And see you at the next, or see you over there driving to the Bangash boys. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our panelists for such an engaging and interesting discussion. With that, we bring to an end the sessions here at the Kalam Hub. However, we still have sessions going on today. We have The End of the West is Not the End of the World going on at Kalam Lawns. And we also have the Bangash brothers performing later today. Hope to see you there. Thank you very much for attending all the sessions here, and wish you a great rest of the evening. Thank you.